Hello, dear listener. My name is Rose, and I am the writer, director, etc. of this podcast audio drama. Sorry about the delay in getting these episodes out, and thank you so much for all your kind support and patience. I would like to welcome you to our 5th season of the Wessex dramas with an adaptation of Thomas Hardy's novel, The Trumpet Major. As with our last few, this is of course a romance story with some light-hearted shenanigans. Anne has to choose from 3 suitors of varying levels of suitableness, all while King George and his entire court come to their small local town of Weymouth to survey the possible invasion of Napoleon. And by the way, it is that King George, the insane one, before he went insane, you know. So pop on your mob cap, loosen your stays, and vaguely curse at the French, and let's sit down to watch the unfortunate attempts of young romance to blossom.
Internal, Miller's house, dining room, evening. The men are sitting at one end of the table, and the ladies are seated together. David is coming in and out, replenishing the tea and serving pudding at this rather late high tea.
I hope that you escaped the bit of rain we had, my dear.
Yes, I believe all you country folk call it St. Swithin's Day or Christening Day if it rains.
Yes, at the last christening I went to, they named the boy George after the king.
I hope that the king will stay in town long enough until I've seen him.
Anne offers Matilda some milk, as David has just poured Matilda's tea. Matilda frowns and gives her a little moo.
Oh, no, milk and tea is a horror in the best of circles now.
Anne replaces the milk, ruefully and somewhat miffed. Mrs. Garland quickly leans across and interjects.
The king will wait until the corn turns yellow. He always does.
How very fashionable yellow is getting for gloves these days.
Yes. I hear that some people wear them to the elbows and...
Anne offers Matilda the sugar, but she shakes her head and pityingly grimaces at Anne.
Perhaps, sometimes. Not elbows in polite society, however, although I could have done with long elbows when I banged my own elbows at my aunt's mansion last week.
I hope that you weren't much hurt.
Oh, yes. My aunt had her footman bring some salves, and her lady's maid had some art sworn bring me some wounds. She's a very large establishment, you know.
Matilda sips her tea with her little finger affectedly extended. There is a knock at the door, and John comes in, removing the helmet of his full formal uniform, resplendent with white waistcoat, white breeches, and a towering plume. They all look up.
John! Come and take some tea with us and meet Bob's intended, Miss Matilda Johnson. Ma'am, this is Robert's brother John.
John bows.
Your humble servant, ma'am.
He then steps forwards to see Matilda, who is sitting with her back to the window in the growing twilight. John recognises Matilda in astonishment and horror. The feeling is mutual, and Matilda rises unsteadily.
I don't feel well. This hot day has quite upset me.
She puts her hand to her head and rocks, as if to faint. Bob grabs her and helps her out of the room, followed by Mrs. Garland.
'Tis obvious that she be a sensitive lady, and used to the ways of the countryside. Or perhaps, being very shy of men, John's regimentals were too overpowering for her.
Anne moos, a little conditionally. John looks devastated.
John, sit ye down and take some tea.
No, thank you, Father. I'm fine. No tea, no. I'm just going to go out for a minute.
John strides quickly through the room and exits via the French windows. Chapter 66. External Garden, Evening. John walks swiftly up to the back of the big rear garden. He walks rapidly and unseeingly about the path, intertwining with the stream. John comes to a halt temporarily and holds his brow.
By God, what's to be done?
He resumes walking until Bob appears.
That you, John?
Yes, I'm just taking a little air.
Well, she's getting around nicely now, so I'll just visit a couple of my mates in the village.
John seriously takes his brother's hand, and Bob looks surprised.
You won't be telling many people the news, will you?
What?
I mean, you won't be back late, will you?
Don't worry, big brother. I won't.
Bob pats John on the shoulder and walks off, watched sadly by John. Bob looks back over his shoulder as he walks away.
I'm quite grown up now, you know.
John eventually moves off to around the front garden. Chapter 67. External, Miller's house, front, garden, night. John leans against a tree, thinking what to do about Matilda. He hears a trap draw up, and he hears Farmer Derryman get out and knock at the door. John, in the gloom, hears his father answer the door.
Oh, good evening to you, Derryman.
Good evening to you, Miller. I've just come about that little matter we had discussed. Here's my box. Do you keep it safe from fire and thieves?
The miller takes the box.
I will, Derryman. Don't you be worritin'.
I'll be gone a few days now.
Don't worry. I'll take it right up to my business room straightways.
That's a good neighbour, Mr. Loveday. A good neighbour.
He's coming in a while?
No, I'll be off. Now, good evening.
John sees the shadow of Derryman leave and hears his trap and horse trot away. A minute or so later, the miller emerges with Mrs. Garland and Anne, and they head for the front gate.
Now, ladies, ye must let me show you the new moon from the bridge. 'Tis a most pretty thing, and I think ye will both enjoy it.
They go out through the gate. John then creeps stealthily back into the house. Chapter 68. Internal, Miller's house, Matilda's doorway, night. John silently moves along the corridor to the outside of Matilda's bedroom, which is half open. John sees Matilda standing, preening with her bonnet before her mirror.
Oh, Bob's brother.
I must speak with you. Look at me, Matilda. Matilda, you know who I am.
Matilda tosses and then pats her hair.
I've never seen you before.
Oh, so you would make me bring down the friends of Private Phillips, who shot himself because you changed his bed for that of Sergeant Harris, or the friends of Sergeant Harris, who was sacked for using army funds to replenish your wardrobe, or the friends of Captain Hargraves, whose new wife left him when you wrote her that little letter, or...
Matilda looks furious and puts her hands on her hips.
Oh, shut up. That's quite enough from you.
Then how much will you accept?
Ooh, it'll take quite a lot to get rid of me, mister. And as for keeping ush-ush to your little brother...
The voices fade out, with Matilda making high demands and John emptying the contents of his pockets to her and then writing a bill and giving it to her as well. Matilda snatches these things, stuffs them in her pocket and then waves him away. John is very upset and he turns to go. They hear a knock at the door and then voices just outside in the garden.
I've changed my mind, and I've just come to reclaim my box, Lovejoy.
Right a moment, Derryman. I'll just go get it.
They hear the creak of the miller's boots on the stairs and John turns to listen. He then wipes the tears from his eyes and looks around worriedly.
Get out. Down the other stairs before the tosspot finds you. Get out with you. Come on, get out.
John sniffs and hastily starts to exit.
Look, come down to the garden in 10 minutes and I'll have got those other guineas from my saddle purse.
All right, that better. I'll be down in a minute, but don't forget, you're still supposed to send the rest of your wages to me every month, or you'll find me back with your dear Bob.
John hurries out. Chapter 69. Internal, mill, day. Bob and the miller attending some grit stuck under the millstones. Bob then asks something of the miller, who pulls out his pocket watch and looks. The miller then points out to the back of the house interrogatively, and the two of them leave the mill. Chapter 70. External, miller's house, garden, day. The miller and Bob meander through the garden. the miller pointing out this and that and outlining his plans, with much arm waving. Bob keeps looking up at the upper windows. Suddenly, they see David hurrying to them excitedly.
Master, she's gone. I tried the door, and 'twere on latch, and it opened, but she were gone.
Matilda!
He runs off towards the house, and the miller and David look at one another ruefully. Chapter 71. External, Mrs. Garland's house, front door, day. Bob raps at the front door, and Anne answers.
Oh, Captain Robert, good morning.
No, 'tis a bad morning. And anyway, 'tis nigh on midday, and I can't find her.
Who?
Matilda!
What? Gone?
Completely.
Have you visited the...
Parson, the clerk, Mitchells, Beeches and Cripplestraws. She ain't there, Miss Anne.
But where do you want me to...
You know, wells, quarries, cliffs, rivers and stuff.
Certainly. Of course. I will, Captain Robert. I'll just get my hat.
She pops in the house and then reappears bonneted. Montage. They poke sticks into pools, they stare at rivers, they peer into wells, they lean over cliffs, tentatively. Anne sits down on some grass with an exhausted bump and fans herself with her hand. It is hot. Bob sits down next to her as well.
She was really beautiful, wasn't she?
Oh, yes. What on earth possessed her to go away? And so suddenly?
I don't know. I shall soon be drove to say I don't care. With all this searching.
Anne points away.
Perhaps the quarry bottom over there? She might have gone for a walk and got lost.
She starts to rise, but Bob springs to his feet and offers his hand, which she takes. Bob suddenly kisses her hand, and Anne looks shocked.
Captain Loveday! I shan't go another step with you, sir.
She hurries off, and Bob goes after her, expostulating.
Sorry, Miss Anne. Upon my life, I didn't mean it. I just for a moment admired you as a sweet little craft. You know, it's having been shut up in a ship for 18 months. Womenfolk seem so new and nice.
Nice?
I think of poor Matilda the most, of course, and she'll always stick to her.
Well, I hope you find her and that the wedding shall not be put off, but my head aches and I'm going home.
I shall accompany you.
No! I'm going alone. You are supposed to be looking for your betrothed.
She starts to walk away.
Oh, I will. I am.
Anne has gone, and Bob stands, reflecting.
I wonder what John advises. And it is the mess tent. But David is doing a chicken.
He sets off home. Chapter 72. Internal, Miller's house, kitchen, day. Bob and his father are seated at the table, and David is serving, moving between the fire and the dresser to their big table. Despite his woe, Bob is still doing justice to the large fowl and cutting more off the bird, or helping himself to the stuffing and pouring extra bread sauce.
Well, thanks for looking, Dad. Oh, and you, David. But it's as I feared. She's gone off in scorn, as we weren't good enough for her.
To my mind, she seemed glad enough to get hold on us.
But you don't know, Father, what delicate feelings are in her real, refined mind. I wonder if you did anything to disgust her.
Faith, not that I know of. I didn't say a single vulgar thing.
You didn't go drinking out of the big mug with your mouth full, or wipe your mouth with your sleeve, did you, Dad?
I'll swear I didn't. And I took my solid victuals in the back kitchen so as to only have a few crumbs and a drop in her company.
Well, that was sensible at least.
He ruminates and then turns to look at David.
Perhaps it was David.
David puts down some more rolls on their table.
'Tweren't me, Captain Robert. I gave her the best silver and the feather cushion for her own for her to sit on.
Bob puts his head on his hand and argues to himself in an undertone. And, as he does, David and then the miller sidle out of the kitchen and flee out to the mill.
It could have been the bed. Perhaps it were too hard. She's delicately nurtured, and a hard bed might be. She must have carried a box with her own dainty hands. The poor thing.
He sighs, then looks up espies the fruit pie and cuts, then serves himself a big slice. He sighs again, shakes his head, spoons on a big dollop of cream, then tucks in. Chapter 73. External, Overcome Down, Hillside Approach to Encampment. Bob is walking up to see his brother when he espies John walking down to meet him in full uniform. They meet and talk. John indicates a little ravine nearby, which they then walk to. They sit down and talk as Bob tells John his woe, and John explains that the reason for Matilda's departure is his fault. Bob looks horrified, shouts, "What?" and scrambles to his feet. Bob shouts and jabs his finger at John, who nods his head with sorrow and holds out his hands in admission and self-depreciation. Bob then says that, nonetheless, he is going to find out and catch up with Matilda, as he doesn't care what she is like and wants her anyway. Bob stalks off in high dudgeon, and John looks after him in a very depressed state. Chapter 75. External, Overcome Mill, Day. Bob is walking up the path to the mill, carrying his clothes in a bundle on a stick across his shoulder, and swishing disconsolately with another stick at nearby bushes. David, coming out of the mill, sees him, brightens, and rushes down the path to meet Bob.
All right again, Captain. A wedding after all. Hooray!
Bob immediately brightens, seizes David, and dances around with him.
Oh, she's back. She's back. Hooray, she's back. Hooray, hooray, hooray.
David skids to a stop.
Oh no, not Miss Matilda, but your father, Captain Robert. Still, no harm done. It's all the same. The victuals won't be wasted.
Bob throws down his switch and bundle.
Victuals? What do I care for victuals?
He walks on towards the mill door, where his father appears.
Sorry I didn't continue the hunt, Bob, but after you said that she had left in scorn on us, I thought...
It's all right, Father. I know why she left. She can go. John told me she's been the plaything of half the regiment.
Plaything of... Wow. Well, I'll be. She has made great fools on us, my lad. I thought he had more sense and would at least chuck up on a woman afore ye axed her to be your wife. But don't ye worry about the victuals and all, as I'm to marry Mrs. Garland, so the black pot won't be getting stale and the cake's mouldy.
Bob just looks down and doesn't congratulate his father.
Poor Matilda.
I'm sorry as how my wedding preparation will be using your planned stuff and all, but I thought not to waste 'em, and Mrs. Garland seemed happy enough.
Bob picks up his bundle.
It's all right, Father. If you don't want to waste them, I'll just put the kettle on.
He sighs again, turns, and walks off in the direction of the house.
That was an episode of The Trumpet Major, written by Thomas Hardy and adapted by me and my co-writer Anne-Marie Goldthorp. I would like to thank our new editor for this episode, Franziska Schriek. I would also like to thank our amazing cast: Mike Joy, Oliver Hickey, Stephen Marshall, Izzy Joy, Mike Staddon, Caro Joy, Dan Almond, Neil Highley, John Simpson, John Steele, Peter Allison, and Alban O'Brien. You can find us on YouTube under Rose Goldthorp Films. We are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. We might be in a few other places, but currently that is debatable. We are also on the Thomas Hardy Society website and also on our own website, The Daily Dilettante. If you want more updates on what's going on with the podcast and with its subsequent films, you can sign up to our newsletter from the Rose Goldthorp website and I believe the Daily Dilettante website, or you can just check in on our Instagram and Facebook on Rose Goldthorp Films. I tend to update those semi-regularly. Anyway, thank you so much for your hard work and support and kindness, and chat to you next time, kids.